audiovisual industry in the era of the digital is quite interesting in many ways. In some ways, it's very different. Obviously, technologically, it's quite different, and allows for enormous, huge, almost infinite capacity and channels and so forth. It's in that way quite different. So we've gone from a period of limited resources to almost infinite resources. That might be an exaggeration, but okay. This makes possible the potential, at least, for many people to access information and entertainment and so forth, cultural products, but also the potential for people to produce and distribute cultural products and information and so forth. So this does give the potential of being very different from the previous era when it was limited. But in some ways, we have some of the same features in the industry, because we have companies that have want to produce and distribute material, and they have certain kinds of goals and motivations. Often, if they're commercial, which often they are, they have certain needs in terms of profits and so forth. And therefore, in that sense, there's perhaps a tendency for there to be fewer and fewer of these companies that have the resources to produce quality programming and so forth. And therefore, there's somewhat the same situation where you have, in many cases, only still a few big companies producing a lot of the products. So in that sense, it could be similar and somewhat the same and nothing new. It's flexible at the moment in some ways, because people are trying to figure out what will work, what won't work, and so there's a lot of movement and negotiation going on. But still, you find, at least in certain countries, in my country at least, there is still this domination by the very big media companies. We have to qualify that and look at specific industries, specific areas, and see, some slight differences. But I would say those very large companies that in the past were dominant in our media and our audiovisual industries, they're still there. They're still very big. They're still quite profitable. And also they're able to figure out what's going on and try different things, innovate. And so it's still a bit fluid, but still, unless we have some interest in developing more access, more possibilities for anyone, citizens and so forth, to produce and share cultural, audiovisual products. Well, I don't know. In some ways, it's still the same. So it's the same and different. Yes, I think some of the main players in the audiovisual industry are the same as they were before. As I've said, some of the major companies that have dominated in the past, well, they still dominate. Of course, there are new players, importantly new players that are mostly involved with the digital and have been very influential and successful and powerful in the digital realm. The companies like Google and Apple and so forth, obviously. They're very successful, but they also are the very large corporations that have certain kinds of motivations and goals, and well, we wonder sometimes how different that is. Their main characteristics are to survive, to grow, the idea of growth is also a really important one, because they're constantly wanting to grow, and needing to grow for whatever, their owners, their stockholders, and so forth. So that influences the kind of decisions that they make. It influences their relationship with users and so forth. In other words, who has the resources to be able to participate in these industries and on the internet. The other players I think that are important not to forget are the advertisers and advertising and the commercial orientation that, well, it's similar to previously, but I think even more profound, because we sometimes can't avoid the advertising, and it's everywhere, and it's growing, and also it's sometimes personalized to us because of the information that now the main players are gathering and selling to advertisers, so they can target the advertising specifically to us. So those are some of the, I think, main characteristics. Of course, there are changes and things going on. Nothing is absolutely certain. It can develop in different ways, so hopefully there will be some interest in developing the internet in ways that isn't dominated by commercial players, but, well, we'll have to wait and see. One of the main barriers to the internet, well, if we step back and look at the world globally, there is something like 1/2 of the world that doesn't have access to the internet. I may be slightly off on this figure, but not everyone has the internet. So this, I think, needs to be taken into consideration if we want to say there's so much more diversity. Diversity for whom? And then the diversity involves what? Just different players, different kind of commercial players on the internet. Is that diversity? I think there certainly is diversity. We as individuals, we as citizens, we as individual cultural producers, well, we can produce our own messages and creations and so forth, films, videos, whatever, and distribute them. But who will they reach? Who will be interested? We don't want to underestimate that possibility. But then if we look at who dominates, access to the internet, as well as who dominates the major channels and so forth, then we have the same players as before, and they have their own interests. And, they want diversity in that they want to be quite crude, sell to a wide variety of people. They want a lot of markets, so they will be diverse, but diverse in terms of their products and diverse in terms of what they want to distribute to us. They have a lot of resources. So, the main barriers, I think people acknowledging that there should be some space for true diversity and a lot of public activity on the internet, access to the internet, and not, I think, relying on the main powerful players, the corporations often, to determine what is diversity. So I think true diversity is a constant negotiation in a way, and the barriers are, I would say, that commercial orientation and the main players being so big. So we'll hope that there can be more diversity in the future.